Welcome to the No Limit Selling Podcast. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the No Limit Selling Podcast. And today, I'm so excited. We've got two amazing people with us, Meredith and Bocar, and we're going to talk about leadership, sales, and life because they're all interconnected. And I think the first step is knowing who your audience is. And for me as a host, knowing who our guests are. Bocar, why don't you go first? Give us a snapshot about who's Bocar. I know you're in Vancouver, and welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. So I'm a managing director at Forum Ventures. Forum Ventures is an early stage fund. So we do pre-seed and seed investment into B2B SaaS software companies. My background is in sales and go-to-market. So I spent the better part of the last 15 years advising and working with founders on their early customer acquisition motions and go-to-market motions. So 0 to 10 million ARR is my sweet spot when it comes to that. But I was also a founder and also an operator before that. So I'm excited today about my experience.
Thank you. Meredith, welcome to the program. Give us a snapshot of you.
Thank you. Well, I'm a co-founder and president of a company called Grow Strong Leaders, and I've worked with my two business partners for 32 years. Our focus has been on helping people in the workplace communicate more effectively with each other, and we do that with our software tools. We're not consultants. We provide tools that are used by both consultants and organizations to help people connect more effectively with each other.
So Meredith, you guys must be struggling financially because there's no communication problems in any corporation.
Like when I know, we have to really look hard to find those. That's the number one reason often, that ranks at the top in employee engagement and other surveys is communication issues.
Communications, absolutely. And the other one is very much, you'd think this would be like business 101. Roles and responsibilities. Like people do not have they know the title, but have no idea what people actually do and how it connects with what they do. Mm-hmm. So Bocar, why don't we start with you? Because, having an idea and saying, I'm going to build a company around this is a million people have had, but it really takes leadership when you're starting the path on your own. It's your own self-leadership, because if you can't manage that, you can't convince anyone else to come on board. So why don't we talk about self-leadership? Kind of what are your thoughts on that? And what are the areas that people should focus on to become more in charge of who they are as human beings?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I was a founder myself, and I worked with a number of founders. And I think what is not talked about enough out there in the news, because when you take a look at places like TechCrunch, it generally is about, telling this beautiful story of how amazing it is to be a founder and you raise a lot of capital. But the reality is that it's a very lonely journey to be a founder. There's a lot of hardship and a lot needs to be true for you to be successful. And then you also have to manage how you lead your life also, right? So it starts with self-leadership. And I kind of think of it as, from a founding standpoint, it's really about knowing why you want to build this business in the first place and what your drivers are, because it's much easier to not build a business than it is to build one, right? It's much easier to go work for somebody than it is to start a business. So I think drive is a critical factor, is number one, and getting a clear sense of what your motivations are for building a business, because otherwise giving up is going to be just easier than getting started.
Brilliant. So Meredith, you work with leaders and helping them become better leaders. World According to Umar, our first step is self-leadership. So what are you seeing out there as some of the problem areas, and what are some of the solutions to get people to master this amazing gift, this mind, this body, the spirit?
Yes. Well, a key thing is time, because people are saying, gosh, I just don't have time to do everything. And yet, if a leader will invest the time in getting to know each of the people on their team, what's important to them, what they value, that's a huge investment up front that can lead to amazing performance and productivity over time. And so sometimes we have the short-term view because we're feeling pressured and we've got to get these things done. But in reality, what that also means is a willingness to listen. And too often we're listening for, our turn to speak. And we're only listening on a sort of superficial level. And when you can take time to go deeper, to ask questions, really get at what's behind what the person says. And by the way, this is important for leaders with their team members, but also as salespeople with their clients, because this showing that you have an intense interest in learning about that other person and they sense that curiosity. One of my favorite authors says, curiosity, when it really is drawing out the other person, is felt as love.
Mm.
You think about that, that is very powerful because
And
so many people do it well. You stand out when you learn to really listen.
all right, Meredith, you tease who's the author, because now I need to know, right?
Well, you'll love this. It's called How to Get Clients by Steve Chandler, who's one of my
Oh,
favorite
excellent.
authors.
That's
Yeah.
actually a brilliant insight. So one of the things I find is that by asking the right questions, if you can give your person you're leading, a client, an insight they didn't have before, then you've done your job. Because oftentimes, we can listen and we can ask questions, but if we can ask a question that gives that person an insight, that's huge. And I think that's what we need to do as leaders. That's what we need to do as salespeople.
Yes.
There's some interesting data on the sales side that finds that Gong that records basically a lot of sales calls and provides AI analysis on those calls, showed some data that shows that if during a call a client does most of the talking, those are the calls where the customers feel like they went well, right? Because half the time, I think to Meredith's point earlier, I think in a lot of environments, I think there's this notion that leadership is about, doing the speeches, but the reality is a lot of leadership and a lot of what sales is about really is also just asking questions, listening, but also not just asking questions, but also putting in place systems, for example, during meetings that actually encourage everybody to have a voice. And there's different ways to run meetings, and there's ways to run meetings in such a way that the maybe individuals that are a little bit more on the timid side in the room can also share their opinions. So very important to not just ask questions, but also make sure that the environment is conducive to everybody participating as well.
So in that regard, one of the things the military does really well is that when they have a set of officers around a table at a meeting, the senior officer asks the most junior officer first, and they work their way up on the ranks. Because if you don't do that, people use the leader as a crutch, or they just agree with the leader.
Yeah.
Oh, Meredith, that's a brilliant idea. I agree with you 100%. So it's really nurturing that from the younger folks. So the foundation of leadership and sales and life is the ability to build trust. Because if without trust, asking questions becomes invasive. But when you have trust, you can ask useful questions that get at the heart of things. So why don't we play a little game? And Meredith, we'll start off with you, and we'll go around this little group in a circle. And what is one way that a leader can build trust?
To be willing to admit mistakes.
Love it.
When they've made a mistake, not trying to cover it up, not to blame someone else, but to own up to it, because then that creates a place for other people to feel like they can make mistakes and admit it as well and not get beat up for it.
Absolutely. I was at a wedding and there was about 350 people in the audience, and the priest came up to the podium and said there was another priest that was supposed to be here, but he couldn't make it. So I'm doing it. And I just came out of the seminary and I've never done one of these things before. And just admitting that vulnerability, 350 people in the audience loved him, and he did a great job. And but oftentimes we try and hide our inadequacies and think that, we're being strong. But no, when you actually say, I'm about to go up here, I'm really nervous, but I'm going to do it anyway, people cut you slack. So I love
Mhm.
that. So Bocar, what's another method of building trust with the people that you lead or the people that you sell to?
I'll say it in one word, but I'll expand. I think about accountability, and really what I mean by that is doing the thing that you said you're going to do. Might sound simple, but there's a dynamic where I think even if you think about your professional life, there's a lot of people that overpromise and underdeliver. That is not a good way to build consistency and foundation of trust. I think really having the consistency of just kind of delivering on the promise, I think over time builds trust, because I don't think that trust is one of those things that's is a one-shot thing. It's incremental, and the more you deliver on your promises and remain accountable to some of the things that you said you're going to do, I think the better you're going to be at building trust over the long term.
Mhm.
So I'll add to that. Thank you for sharing that. So we've got 2 tips on building trust. Another way is really to figure out what really drives your people that you lead. And one of the ways to do that is really effective is just at the coffee urn, or when you're just having this casual connection, ask this question. It's like, Meredith, who was your favorite teacher? And then everybody has their favorite teacher. And it's like, oh, it was my elementary school teacher or high school or university. And then go, oh, that's amazing. How did they get the best work out of you? And then they go, oh, what they did was they just told me what I need to do, and I just went and did it. And they just kind of stood back and supported me, or they, held my hand, whatever it is. It does 2 things. Number 1, it associates you with their favorite teacher. Number 2, you understand how to get the best behavior out of them. And number 3, because you took the time to get to know them in that way that didn't seem like it was for the benefit of the company, just builds that connection that gives you the capital you need to ask them to go above and beyond. So Meredith, now the hard work, you get number 4. What's another tip to build trust?
It's extending to people the opportunity to prove themselves. So giving them a challenge. So it builds trust by you showing you trust them. And
Mm,
so you give them these challenging situations and let them know, I've got your back. You're not out there. I'm not hanging you out there to dry. I want to give you this opportunity to stretch and grow. And I think that goes a huge distance for building that trust, because what it does at the same time is it builds that person's confidence in themselves, that, hey, this person is trusting me. This leader thinks I can do this, so I must be able to do it if they think I can. So that kind of trusting on the flip side of extending trust goes a long way to building it.
love it. Bocar's going to do that immediately, right after this meeting. Bocar, what is number 5?
I think there's an underlying thread here that goes back to a topic that we brought up at the top of the call, which is communication. I think often, and to my earlier point, I think trust is built over time. And I think being in constant communication is a good way to build trust with someone. We live in a society that's very divided today on a number of topics. And when you look at some of the core reasons why those things are, you find that people are just not talking to each other or talking to people that hold different viewpoints. I think building an environment or fostering a type of environment where people feel free to share their opinions actually builds trust, so to speak, because now you're not afraid of sharing with that person. And those are the things that build trust overall, in my opinion.
So I'm going to do the last one here and stop torturing you guys, and we'll kind of change topics. Our language is so important, and oftentimes when somebody does something wrong or challenging, it's so easy to say, Bocar, why did you do that?
Right.
As soon as I use the word why, which is a legitimate question, automatically, even if you like me, there's a barrier goes up, a defensiveness comes in automatically. And so the question I like that's a lot more effective is, Meredith, how did you decide to do that? And oftentimes you'll see them look up and go, oh, okay. And they have to think about it, and they give you the thought process behind their decision, in which case you can go, oh, I get how you did that. Here's a better way of doing that. That'll give you better results. And I think how is way better than why.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah. Why is judgmental?
yes.
Really, it's like I don't agree with what you did. So
Yeah.
And one of the best things to do to kind of build trust is to say stuff like, I told you so. No, don't do that. That would be bad.
I love that point, by the way, really quickly. I think it's why makes it about the person. And I think
Mm,
asking the how question makes it about the topic, right? Then you're discussing
yeah.
a topic or an argument as opposed to the person internalizing that and feeling like it's criticism of themselves.
So one of the things that I find quite useful is when something happens of note, and let's say it was something that turned out really well, is doing an autopsy on that situation and figure out what did we do that got us this amazing result. And sometimes you can capture a new process that helps us. And certainly when we fail, doing an autopsy, not to kind of single someone out or to beat someone up, but you just take a look at, oh, this is where we went wrong. And how do we recognize it in the future, and how do we handle it better? And just building that from the top down, I think that helps people really understand it's all about how do we get better. That's, I think, the most important thing is I don't
Mhm.
want to be the best uh, unless it's in dating, in which case, Meredith, I'm single. No, I'm not. I'm married. I'm only kidding. But getting better, I think, is if we can get our entire company to make that their mindset, it allows us to improve faster. And if there's an error, recognize it, correct it, move forward faster. Thoughts
Yeah.
on that, Meredith?
Yes. In fact, we have a process that consists of 5 questions that get exactly at what you're talking about, because too often we go from thing to thing to thing and we don't take that time to pause and reflect. And so there are some questions, going back to the idea of asking questions, that I think can help a person process the situation. So what happened? And in conjunction with that, how did you feel about it?
Mm,
And then why did it happen that way? Now, that's not judging, but it's a different kind of a why
mm.
question. What was going on? What were you thinking? What were your motives? And then what were the consequences? What was the impact? Did you get the outcome you thought you would get? And so knowing all that, what would you do differently next time?
Love that. That's actually a
And
good
then your
process.
final question is, what's your next step now?
Mhm.
I think that's like the sixth question then.
Well, the first one we kind of combined. What
Oh,
happened
okay.
and how did you feel about it? It's sort of the left brain,
I
right
think
brain.
yeah, I think it's an A B, but I think they're really important because how did you feel about it is also gets somebody to stop dead in their tracks, and they have to go back and recollect it and really get a sense of it.
Mhm.
And I think that's really, really important is taking them back to that moment because it's so easy to be disconnected. Oh, this thing
Mhm.
happened, and let me give you a book report on what happened. And if you can get them to re-immerse into that moment, they go, "Oh my God, this was going on, and that's why I felt so brilliant, brilliant, brilliant." Bocar, any thoughts on what we both mentioned?
Yeah, I have a bit of I don't know if it's a controversial take that I'd love Meredith's opinion on, but I've got this belief, and I think we tend to, as humans, when things go wrong, we think about what didn't go right, and
Mm,
or at least try to think about how to avoid things from going wrong next time around. What I find people don't do enough is when things go okay, or even if things go well, thinking about what you could have done better, right?
mm,
Because there's a
Mm.
tendency to want to improve on your weaknesses, whereas I think that one way to actually stand head and shoulders above the rest is to keep improving on your strengths, because that's a multiplier. I don't know if you've got a take there, Meredith, but that's the thing that I was thinking about
Oh,
while you're
I
sharing.
think that's an excellent point, and I think these same questions can be used for that same kind of situation. If something went well, but you want to up level the
Right.
next time and do it even better, they would apply in the same thing. And I think that's so important for balance. We don't want to always just analyze things we did wrong.
Right.
What did we do well, and how can we even stretch ourselves to be even more effective next time? I think that's such an excellent point, because I'm one that believes in that growth mindset.
Mm.
that we when you think about it, we don't ever really fulfill our potential. When we get out there where we think we've grown, then we see there's even further. So it's not like we're deficient, but there's just more opportunity. There are more possibilities that we can see the more we stretch ourselves out of our comfort zone.
So I like that metaphor of a car's headlights. They only let you see so far, and as you go down that road, you illuminate more and more
Mhm.
stuff as you go. So yeah, we're
Mhm.
growing. So Meredith, do you think I'm incredibly handsome or just handsome? Don't answer that question, because one of the things people use in organizations is using questions as weapons, or using
Mm.
questions to get the answer I want you to get. And so
Mhm.
we have to be careful that we ask questions that illuminate a situation and not guide people to the answer that we want. And sometimes people even use questions as weapons. Like it seems like an innocuous question, but it's designed to showcase where, John failed miserably. And it's like,
Mhm.
so let's talk about, oftentimes I get called into organizations because the CEO says, Umar, I feel like I am a kindergarten teacher because the VP of finance is not getting along with the VP of manufacturing. And there's this strife in the management team. And, it's going to kind of what you do, Bocar, very much is you've got a founder, they get to a certain level of revenue, and then they start hiring people and sometimes more experienced people. But when they bring people together, the uh, the sum of the parts is greater than the whole that's created because of that friction, that office politics that comes in. So, Bocar, I want to let you address this one. How do you identify if there's office politics going on the management team or discourse? And other than using tasers, how do you recommend they kind of let that go and unite as one?
Yeah, that's a great question. Just earlier today, I was having a conversation with a founder about, hey, at what point should I define my cultural values? And this is a 30 people company. And I thought to myself, you should already have them, and you should already have some type of alignment of what good looks like. I think the core source of a lot of that miscommunication is, I think, from the top at the very beginning, you need to set some clear foundations on, here are some of the things that we're working towards, here are the KPIs that are the most important ones for us, and here's how we each participate in supporting these KPIs, and here are the shared values and cultural elements of that we hold true. I sadly, because I work with a lot of later stage companies as well, a lot of the times when there's issues and I ask about some of the underlying foundational things, they tend to be missing. I think when there is misalignment, misagreement, or challenges between different departments, I think the first place to look is, do we even have like a common place where we've actually agreed on what we're working towards and how we're working together? And generally speaking, that starts to uncover a lot of the gaps in the organization.
So, Bocar, one of the things I find is oftentimes companies get to a certain stage and then they hire a consultant that comes in that helps them figure that stuff out. And I think that's completely wrong because oftentimes the founder is the poster child for this company
Mhm.
and is really figuring out what their values are around work and what they're building.
Right.
And then they get to be live and breathe the ideals that they want their company to be, as opposed to we did a retreat and we came up with like you've seen mission statements all across the globe.
Yeah.
We are dedicated to the betterment of our planet and monkeys, and also making our employees are number one. And it's like, oh my God, A, I want to throw up, and B, everybody has the same stuff. And when you really figure out, who's the founder, what drives them, and then you get people that are attracted to that,
Yeah.
and you build something freaking amazing. Meredith, thoughts on the subject?
I just think that's so true. When I have talked on my own podcast with leaders who have formed really effective companies and cultures, they're very clear upfront about what the values are and what that looks like in action. They're not just words that they spout off. here's what it looks like when we show respect to each other, or we show integrity in terms of how we show up at meetings and showing up on time, all these pieces that go together. And then repeating those and articulating those. I'm thinking of the CEO of a law firm that's got hundreds of employees, and he has town halls regularly where he is reminding them or speaking to different aspects of the company and how we live. So I so agree with you that the founder or the CEO, that core person, is reminding everybody and also living by those. And if he or she falls short, acknowledging that, apologizing, and modeling what does it look like if we fall short of one of these values? How do we recover from that so that the values are still intact, even though we're humans and we're not going to get it right every time?
Brilliant. And Meredith, I love the idea of capturing stories where actually people are living up to the ideals, because a lot of times they're just artifacts that, it's like, these are our values. What does that really mean? And when you tell, oh, let me tell you what this means. One of our truck drivers was at this customer's location and they did this, this, and this because this is our value. This is what it means. And then you get 10 or 11 stories around that same thing. And I think what that does is it gives a better 360-degree understanding of that value. Especially when new employees come in, then it's like, well, let's tell you a couple of stories of this value, and they really get it and go, oh my God. Either it's like, you guys are nuts, so I don't want to be here, but more than not, it's like, oh my God, this is where I've always wanted to be, because it's not just some antiseptic values. It's like real living, breathing.
Well, and you know what else you just struck on that I think is so true? You hire to those values. So you make clear to candidates what the core values are and ask them perhaps to give examples of how they have exhibited this in their own lives, or if they're willing to live by these, because I think that that's what is so important. The more you can attract people that already share those values, the easier it is to create the culture where people live by them.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you don't need all the values from an employee. If they've got 80% of them, hallelujah, praise the Lord. Bocar, any thoughts?
No, I love what's being shared here, and I love, like, examples matter, actions matter. What I wanted to add is that it doesn't even have to be big examples, big actions. I was thinking about this story I heard of a well-known company that does about 100 million in revenue a year, and every morning the CEO empties the dishwasher and makes sure that the kitchen is clean. I think that that's not just, saying stuff on a slide deck. That's actually living the values and actually giving examples and to your employees of actually how you expect things to go in your organization.
How Gandhi of that person, because I think it's like, be the change you want to see. And that's a good example of, hey, no job's beneath me. I am serving you. Meredith Bocar, thank you so much for joining me today. This was like a brilliant conversation. And this time I'm going to let you go first, Meredith. How can people find you? And is there anything else you want to share with them before we part company today?
Sure. Our website is growstrongleaders.com. I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. LinkedIn is my favorite, so connect with me there. I would encourage, just because of what you just shared about serving, there's a question when we're in a sales conversation or any other type of conversation: how can I serve this person so powerfully that they never forget our conversation for the rest of their life? With that kind of a question, it can't be about you and your product. You see, it's focusing on them, to your point earlier. So how can I help this person feel so valued that they, of course, want to interact with me again in the future because of how they felt when they were with me?
Love that. It's all about setting intent. Bocar, how can
that.
people find you? Any last thoughts?
I'll actually share my sales version of that. One of the things that I usually say is think about how your customer's life is going to be different as a result of working with you. And I think if you get that mindset, it's always focused on the customer. So pretty easy to reach out to on my end, forumvc.com. If you're an early stage founder, reach out to us. Pretty available on LinkedIn as well, and pretty easy to find. It's Bocar, Dia, B-O-C-A-R, last name Dia, D-I-A. hit me up there, and I'm happy to share.
Brilliant. Thanks, guys, for being on the show. I'm going to stop the broadcast and we'll chat for a few minutes. If you guys watching this liked what you heard, reach out to Meredith, reach out to Bocar, and like this podcast so we can bring more guests your way.